Mr. Zamora, we're ready. Yes, thank you.
Yes, we are. Great. Thank you. So we'll do a call to order. Mr. Secretary, would you be able to take attendance?
Yes, Mr. Co-Chair. Stephen Musto.
Present.
Tammy Solis. Vicky Chon.
Present.
Thank you. Anika Jain. Sissy Zhang.
Here.
Gabriela Munoz. Ms. Escobedo, have you been in touch with?
I tried contacting her today, but no response or phone call. I'm not sure if she's coming today.
Okay, thank you so much. Harpreet Kaur. Prakash Dasot.
Present.
Thank you. Anna Schipper.
Here.
Thank you. Siddhartha Banerjee. And Jeanette Pelletier.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Christy Rocha. Leticia Salinas.
Present.
Thank you. Daniel Hillman. And then I see Sharon Coco in the list of attendees, Ms. Salinas. Ms. Coco, were you appointed to the?
Yes, I was appointed to serve on this committee as the board trustee. So,
congratulations, Ms. Coco. I have an outdated roster, I think. I list as members of this committee both Trustee Jones and Trustee Prasad. Did you replace one of the two?
I did. I replaced Trustee Jones.
All right. Welcome. Well, I guess I'll leave that to the chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I believe that we have 7 out of 12 appointed voting members, if I counted correctly. And by that count and our custom, I believe that we have a quorum.
Yeah, I think just at the edge there. And we have community representation. So yes, we're happy to have Ms. Coco join us, our newest trustee, and I believe was just appointed to this group on Saturday at the board retreat. So welcome to our monthly meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so first we'll do the approval of the agenda. I'll put it back in the chat. But if you could look that over, and then we'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Jeanette Pelletier.
I'm sorry, who moved first, please?
Ms. Chan.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, I was looking at the minutes myself.
All right, so are there any objections to the approval? All right, we're going to move on to the minutes from the previous meeting held just a couple weeks ago. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those, so I'll give it a moment before we entertain motions for corrections or approval. Mr. Secretary, if you want to note that Trustee Prasad has joined us as well. I believe Dr. Rocha is joining us right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recognize both Dr. Rocha and Trustee Prasad as present.
Sorry, I was distracted a bit. So was there something for me here?
No, we're just recognizing that you're present and making sure the attendance is noted.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Anna Shipper seconds.
Thank you. Any corrections that were noted? Sometimes spelling and things? No? All right, we have a motion for approval with the second. Are there any objections to this motion? All right, so it is approved. Next, we'll go to public comment for oral communications. Ms. Salinas, is there anyone in the public waiting?
There's no one.
Okay. Anyone like to make a public comment now? This is the time to do so. All right, well, as always, we'll monitor see if anyone shows up to speak. Okay, so the review of 21-22 survey questions and an update of the survey. So a really central piece of data that we use is the LCAAC survey, which is generally delivered in January or February each year. For the last 4 years, we have had a pretty consistent set of questions, which you can see from the survey results. And for the LCAAC survey today, you'll see a lot of those questions with some additions as well. Ms. Salinas, did you have any kind of commentary on that?
No, I was thinking if you were to share your screen and walk us through it, and I know you
Sure.
want to give the history of it, and I think the context is that you had a chance to look at them, but also we had the data presentation this last time, and the questions really are: do we have enough here to really get to the root of what changes or goals and actions that we want to improve upon and to get information from our community? But I'll let you, Mr. Mustard, walk us through it.
Sure. And while this is obviously we're looking at the questions specifically, this is really a great opportunity for members of this committee to say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about this. That will inform the discussion we have on our goal setting that's going to be coming up over the next couple meetings. So we'll go through the questions. Obviously, getting attend elementary, middle, or high school. Sometimes we don't get many, but we do get Fremont residents without children who respond. So that's always good to have a little community feedback. The schools listed. So first we have a question about diversity, children's backgrounds, religions. Kind of a little different direction is child school uses instructional materials and resources that are show support for different backgrounds, cultures, and ethnicities. So those two are obviously similar things. Is there any, I guess maybe let's do this. Let's go one page at a time and see if there's any particular feedback or questions that you'd be interested in learning more about. And then the last question on that page is the lessons are engaging.
This is Anna Shipper. I have a question about number 4.
Okay.
Can anybody give me an example of what an instructional material or resource reflects the various backgrounds of?
Sure, I'll start. This is not my expertise, but I'm sure Ms. Salinas will be able to help. But this is you probably heard about this most when we do textbook adoptions, because when you're adopting a textbook, you're adopting a very large curriculum that includes, as a former history teacher, that some things can be very controversial. It's very much in the news right now. We have the trustees of Fremont have made equity essential tenet of our school district. So we want to make sure our instructional materials reflect that. And Ms. Salinas, did you want to add anything?
Yes, as educators and within all school districts, we see how making sure that the materials and instruction that students receive are engaging and motivating. And a lot of times we see that through the pedagogy and the practice that are ethnically and linguistically diverse materials in front of them. So what this really speaks to is as parents are home with students looking at homework, and certainly during the time we were on Zoom, parents had a more of an eye view as to the materials and supplies that our kids have access to. So a story that may be about the diversity of our community will really speak to a child, motivate them, get them engaged in learning. That's what we want to see in our schools, and so that's really what this is speaking to get a parent's opinion on that.
Yeah, and another really recent example is the secondary English departments have adopted a large number of new books that to be used in classrooms that are more reflective of the diversity of our community. I see Mr. Lechner with his hand up.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I tried to find the Zoom button. Anna, my son is in 3rd grade, and I was going to tell you that he came back recently telling me some words in foreign languages I'd never heard about. And I think that it was from this music class where he sang something about children from around the world. I can't remember the word or the language, but the way that I read these 2 questions is that I think in 3, I think it kind of talks about the student's own identity, which for my son and I is very strong. And I think 4 is really about the other people's identity in the sense that it develops tolerance. That's the way I read these 2 questions.
I like that. All right, why don't we move on to the next page? Challenge level of the classes, obviously related to that is homework. Another homework question, another homework question. And then number 10 and 11, students learning skills to prepare for life after graduation, and teachers have high expectations for all students. And I see Ms. Pelletier has her hand up.
I do, thank you. I was looking both at the proposed questions or the existing questions and the results from the most recent survey. And so I want to express, whether it's a question or not, I want to express a concern with the fact that the results of these 2 questions, question 10 and 11, are resulting in a large number of parents and families who don't know what kinds of supports and learning interventions are being provided at their school sites, or don't believe that their child is receiving effective enrichment experiences. So I think that it's something that we should really be looking into, that, when parents strongly agree with things, that's great. And that makes us feel good. But I really feel like one of the intentions for the LCAAC is for us to be focusing on those underserved and potentially historically marginalized populations. And so I'm really interested in what the conversation will be around what we do when we are not pleased with the results that we're seeing in those questions.
I'll just personally say that I think that's an excellent observation. I think this group has done a lot of things to address the issues this survey has raised, but expectations of life after graduation, high expectations, what does that mean? I think we could define that better for our community. Mr. Lechner?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, Anjanette, that I think that in 10, if I had to answer this question, that my uncertainty wouldn't surround, if I said I don't know, my uncertainty wouldn't be concerned with what my child is learning, but rather what they might need after graduation, because our society is in great flux and things change constantly. So with 10, it was the don't know answer that you were concerned about. Is that right? In 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was looking at areas where we're not seeing necessarily that, we're not necessarily seeing that every parent is agreeing with some of and some of these questions don't line up exactly with the previous survey questions. But I'm definitely really interested in times when our parents and our students there may be this lack of knowledge about how to get the things they need, whether that's for life after graduation, whether they have those expectations, and whether or not they're receiving support, and that might be appropriate.
Mr. Chair, if I may follow up, can I just briefly?
Sure.
Jeanette, do you have a problem, or would you like to improve the wording of the question, or is the subject matter a concern of yours?
No, I'm not concerned. We haven't gotten to 12 and 13, which are the ones that have that same challenge when you look at the previous survey results. It's not the wording that I'm concerned with. It's that when our constituents, our families are telling us that they don't know, then what can we do to improve that knowledge and that access for our students? So, I think that the survey questions are important, but I also think that what the survey results have been telling us for the past couple of years are that we have some gaps in clarity of message or clarity of what's available for the families that we're serving.
Yeah, like I can share an example. So in the last couple of years, we have seen that, and one of the recommendations that we've looked at is community liaisons or family liaisons, because if there is a gap in knowing what are offerings or what support we can give families, then we've seen a lot more support as it relates to when we have a community liaison or a family liaison that makes phone calls, as we heard from Mrs. Covedo earlier today, like that direct contact, other ways to get the message across. I think that definitely is going to be an area of need for us, continued need. And so the outcome on the other side of these questions will be, how do we use the results from the last couple of years to really change some of the goals and actions that we're looking at. So absolutely, yeah, those are going to be our next steps.
Mr. Lechner.
Mr. Chair, I just noticed that 12, 13, and 14 are all questions with a conditional introductory clause. Maybe these questions are more complicated than the other ones, so people who are in a hurry and complete the survey simply have trouble processing it in time.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole science behind how questions are worded, so it's good to note. Okay, so we we have a couple questions. We've kind of talked about those. The social emotional questions start with 15. Adults keep my students physically and emotionally safe and creates a school environment that helps children. Okay. I always love this question. Child tells me about a typical school day. The comments are positive. Bullied. Schools prize counseling and social emotional support. You can see this is where this one in particular we've spent a lot of time the last couple of years addressing. Another thing is counseling support. And stressed, anxious, reaching out to an adult. So we have taken a lot of actions to directly address these things. So hopefully that is going to be resulted in surveys. Mr. Lechner has his hand up.
I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I used to design professional exams for the state of California, so I'm very, very attuned to the wording of these questions. And does it seem to anybody else that maybe it does not apply response might be appropriate for some of these? Like, if my child was bullied, what do you answer if it didn't happen? I mean, do you have to agree, or do you say you don't know?
It's a good question. Ms. Chan?
Yeah, I kind of had the same thoughts with those questions, that if these it kind of applies to the previous ones too. If it doesn't apply, there's no answer that I could click other than don't know, or yeah, so maybe these questions, it would be good to just have a neutral or not applicable option. Yeah. And then if we do put not applicable, maybe if we put it for every question, defining what non-applicable means for some of our English learner parents or anything, being very clear that non-applicable would be like, this situation does not apply to me and my family. So I think that would be something we could improve on.
Okay. Ms. Shipper?
I was going to say something along the lines of does not apply. I've done other surveys where that was a choice, where if it was not applicable, just said does not apply.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's really good feedback right there. So we're moving on to next page, programs and access. Now, this question is maybe uses some of the wording that would be a little harder for people to understand, because what does it mean? However, these questions are very much required from the LCAAC. So we want to make sure we have community feedback for them as well. Technology, obviously, the last 3 years, that became very important. Communication, these are always important things to know, kind of akin to talking about expectations at school. What does the communication between school and home look like? there's no way to ever keep improving that. We always want to keep improving that. So that is important feedback we'd like. Any feedback before I move on? Okay, so Ms. Shipper, yes. You're on mute.
If you can scroll back up a little bit, there was a question about attendance. Okay, I think it was number 25. My child's school partners with families to resolve attendance issues or improve attendance in a timely manner. Recently, my husband and I received a letter from the school district saying, our son, seems to have an attendance problem, but this was stuff that was dated back in October and November, and here it is February, into January. We need to make that a little bit more timely. And I know the teachers are really pressed for time in doing so much that they are not necessarily able to reach out like on a weekly basis about this. I don't know how to improve this, but if it could be improved, that parents could be contacted a little bit more quickly than months afterwards. Because if you go to the attendance office, especially for the high schools, to try and clear it, how do you clear that months later? That's difficult to do, and it's just about impossible.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a great point. Sometimes those attendance letters are generated automatically by the system. So if absences happened previously, they're not noted till now, but nevertheless, you're absolutely right. As a parent, what are you supposed to do about that several months after the fact? Okay, so continuing on communications. So phone, email, promotes parental participation, seeking input, well-informed through school communications. This is an important one, especially for site principals when we break it down by schools. This is always interesting. So after school programs, please rank prioritize subjects be beneficial for your student. Very important. And then we have some open response questions as well. Ms. Salinas, did you want to talk a little about those? Because I know that's something we added a couple of years ago.
Yes, and I'll let Mr. Lechner speak or ask
Okay.
this question, and then I can add.
I was just going to make a brief remark regarding the wording of item number 31.
Mhm.
If I were to write this item, I would simply say, which after-school programs would you like to see offered? Rather than having a conditional in there, which I think is more complicated to process. But anyway.
I see what you're saying. Yes. And you're right. We don't need to have the F. We will have those. So Ms. Salinas, did you want to give a little background?
Yes. So these questions in particular, and as a result of, I'm connecting it to the last time you all met, looking at the data, particularly question number 33, I think we need to do some work here to try to see what other information we can get out. I appreciate the open response, and maybe we do keep the open response, but maybe also some examples, so we start to really get a gauge as to if programs are working for families and that parents are seeing the results. We definitely have seen where we have an area of growth is for our students who are unhoused. And so I think adding some more specific questions there, some more details, like is it resources that families need, like direct resources like housing referrals? Is it food? Is it access to materials and supplies, versus maybe not being so open-ended and perhaps like a checklist. Now, the only thing that will be a little problematic is, we're getting the opinion of the whole community, and they're not necessarily the parents or our unhoused students. And so it'll really be, so that's a little bit, something that we'd have to tease apart. So I was thinking, we know who our students are, and working with student support services, we have homeless liaisons, or we have classified and certificate employees that support our unhoused students, and perhaps having a questionnaire that is going directly to our students and to our families through the liaisons might be a way that we can add information to the survey results that we will bring back to you without names and all of that. But that might be a way to get more information, because I can imagine So let me give you an example. If I'm the parent of an English learner, I definitely have opinions as to how my child is learning English or not learning English, versus I'm the parent of a child who's now been reclassified fluent. I may have different opinions, or I'm the parent of a child who is not an English learner. I may have different opinions. It'll be really important to hear from the families who this plan is serving. And so how do we do that? And it's by, my thought is to do some individual questionnaire interviews from our liaisons, and working with Mr. Bailey to then come back and share some of those results. So that were some of the things that Mr. Bailey and I were talking about today, that we could either leave this question as it is, open-ended, and do these individual interviews with families that who we know who they are of homeless, unhoused, or foster youth. Or we could just add more details to this question and then also do the surveys. So just a thought for you all to consider, to give us some more concrete information.
Mr. Lackner?
I don't know why nobody else has anything to say, but anyway, I was going to say, Ms. Salinas, that I think that going directly to the affected parents is probably the best solution and is superior. And if that's possible, maybe question 33, item 33 should be removed from the survey. But if we were to keep it, I would suggest to split it up into at least 3 different questions, if not more, to stimulate the imagination of the affected party to perhaps come up with additional suggestions. Because the issue here is that these are specialized classes and people are unlikely to belong even one of them, and certainly not all 3. So people who read this will not, by the time they're done with that, get to the question mark, they may not feel like the question is talking to them. So I would, at a minimum, break this up into 3. So how might the district better support students who are learning English, question mark, right? And then so that people can check off in their minds which one applies to them, which one doesn't. So it's a minor suggestion, but I hope that the time is well spent, because I think we're supposed to talk about the survey right now, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're supposed to talk about. Ms. Pelletier?
Yeah, I would both agree and disagree with Mr. Lechner. I actually like the idea of breaking the question up into 3 parts so that we can get more specific, targeted input from those who are impacted by each one of those specific issues. I disagree that they're unlikely to belong to multiples of those student groups. Historically, we know statistically that a large percentage of foster youth and unhoused youth are typically often students with disabilities. I think that I have seen data that shows that like Fremont has a higher percentage of students who are English learners who also are students with IEPs. So I do think that there are pupils who are duplicated, but I like the idea of separating them out because we're looking for that unduplicated pupil input. So that's thing 1. Thing 2 is I mean, I don't know how much input you can get on these, but I would really appreciate having the sentence or word be students who are in part of the foster system or who are foster youth, rather than come from foster homes, because many of the students who are participants of the foster youth system are living with kinship placements, are with bio family members. They are not necessarily living in a separate type of foster home. Actually, many of the group homes in Fremont and in this area of the Bay Area have closed. So we don't actually have those specialized group home settings for foster youth anymore in congregate care, and more students are in family homes. So there are likely families who would not see themselves as being a foster home, and what you're looking for is the impact on foster youth. And then I also wonder if you want to similarly parse the language about students who experience disabilities, or are you only interested in the impact on students with learning disabilities? Because your special education population includes students, especially in Fremont, who may have other primary disability needs besides learning disability. And so I wonder if we're interested in the needs of students with disabilities in total, or in the needs in students with learning disabilities.
It's a great question to distinguish right there.
And I think from the
Thank you.
district's perspective, we would like the whole thing. We would want to know about the spectrum of what our students are experiencing. So yes.
Yeah, you're not going to get your families who are deaf, hard of hearing, and who are integrated into the Fremont community to answer that question because they do not believe their children are people with disabilities. That is a second language.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Excellent point. Mr. Lecter?
Mr. Chair, what percentage of our high school graduates goes on to college, please?
It's always hard to gauge that because we do exit surveys, but those are, self-responded things. Our college career indicator, which is a nice state indicator put together, I do not remember offhand. I'm going to look that up as we talk. But that's a good indicator for students who are meeting A to G eligibility. So that's our California eligibility for colleges.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It actually was kind of a rhetorical question, so
Okay.
please don't feel pressured right now. If we could return to the survey one more, well, never mind.
No. I could do that. I'm just.
It really wasn't that important. It wasn't. I mean, the reason why I'm asking is because I find item 34 somewhat intimidating. I'm from Germany, where maybe 25% of people graduate from high school and go on to college. We have strong technical career tracks in Germany that are similar to some union programs you have in America. And so not everybody goes on to college. And I have many friends who didn't go to college, even here in America. And I'm just wondering if that question is perhaps intimidating by making the implicit assumption that everybody has to go to college.
It's a very interesting point. I know a lot of the responses we've gotten to this in recent years have been from parents who were raised not in the United States. So the post-secondary experience in America can be quite different from other countries. That's interesting. Does anybody else have any feedback on that?
I mean,
not certain the answer.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm wondering if maybe, we that work in schools, we're so used to that term college and career.
Right.
And from my definition of it is, or a career that, they have done CTE coursework, they've been in Mission ROP. College certainly can be a technical college, but perhaps it's defining it more so that families have more of an idea of what we mean by college and career. That might be an idea, because when I see that term, I see that as we will graduate with choice. And so our students will have options when they leave, but maybe it's not as explicit as it should be. That's my comment.
Yeah, it actually goes back to questions 11 and 12 that we talked about. Ms. Chan?
Yeah, or maybe even changing and to and/or putting or just getting rid of and altogether, or putting a career technical pathways. That I think is, that's kind of I know I hear that word. But maybe using, I kind of agree with what Ms. Linus was saying, but I think maybe doing or could really emphasize that it's two separate different things. Yeah.
All right. A lot of great feedback on, I think that last one's interesting. I think Salinas is right. We tend to speak education speak sometimes, so the community might not know it as well as we do. All right. Is there anything maybe that wasn't covered on the survey that you'd be interested in seeing? Like, is there something like, I was looking for this, but I didn't see it? I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay. There we go. Mr. Desad.
Yeah, so in regards to the survey result, I just had one kind of question. Are there particular schools which are outliers? Because the current results don't necessarily show, and maybe those results are getting skewed because of one or two schools.
You are correct that some schools have a better return on surveys than others. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a principal who kind of challenged her parent community, and they ended up being, I think, a quarter of the response. So that's something we should monitor when we look over the results, and something we can do. Ms. Zhang?
I was wondering, so I know we generally have surveys for students every year with different organizations, like we had Challenge Success last year. So is there a sort of consistent survey that we can offer to students every year so we can kind of compare the data like we're doing with this parent survey?
Yes, we actually do. The survey we most commonly do with students every year is called the California Healthy Kids Survey. So we do have a lot of longitudinal data on that. The challenge with the Healthy Kids Survey, I think it's a very good survey, but it also is very technical. So it's not the most readable results. That was a nice thing about Challenge Success. They put it in better context. But if that's something that you or this group is interested in, we can certainly provide results from that. We have a lot of results. Dr. Rocha?
Yes, I just would like to also share with the group. So the way that we've done in the past as far as communicating and getting input from our community partners is a multi-pronged approach. And the survey is just one of those components. And so I just want the group to have this kind of context, is that although there might be some schools where there's a lot more families taking the survey, we also do in-person outreach to specific schools or with specific groups of parents. So families who are learning English through the DLAC. And so different ways, or we will approach schools that have a large unduplicated count, and we will do in-person input sessions with that. So this is just one small piece to the larger puzzle of the data that we collect to make informed decisions on our LCAAC. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and those, I really like those, and I think they provide a lot of good discussions. Those visits we do to schools, that was definitely impacted by the pandemic. So we're looking forward to going back to in-person for those. Any other big picture thoughts, specific questions? All things survey.
So,
Sure, go ahead.
So when this survey goes out, it's specifically about informing parents' input to inform the development of the LCAAC.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there is any value in adding a question about whether or not the parent who is responding knows what an LCAP is or is understanding what Fremont's LCAP includes or says, or knows where to access it.
Yes, we're talking about all these things LCAP, but do families know what the LCAP is? Because it's certainly an important part of school funding that is still relatively new.
And I think, I'm remembering last year, we did send kind of through Bright Arrow, we were able to set the stage. But I'm thinking we can link them to our page, might be another option. So, to add to that, to set the stage, here's where we meet. If you have any questions, come join us at the next meeting, that, so we can get some more public speakers going. We could definitely add that as part of the introduction to the survey, so that they know what it is.
Ms. Chan?
Yeah, I also wanted to, we probably discussed it before, but are we going to be offering this in multiple languages as well?
Yes, it's always offered in Spanish and Chinese as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And we're going to, last year we used also SurveyMonkey too, which has a nice translation. It's easy to toggle between it. Well, thank you for your feedback. We're going to do some edits, and we will, I know, Ms. Salinas, the turnaround is going to be pretty quick because we want to get the survey out.
Yes, it'll be really quick. So the next step will be, we will be sharing this with our board, and then we will send it to translation as quickly as we can, and then send it out.
Mr. Lechner?
Mr. Chair, I just like to let Ms. Tammy Solis and Ms. Anika Jane know that I saw and recognized their presence.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. That was a discussion, nothing for action. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Salinas for the next next agenda item on in-person meetings.
Yes, thank you. As we have previewed before, and as linked in our agenda, and as discussed before, and as I sent out a survey, I only got like 3 or 4 to respond, but I think we're just going to have the conversation tonight. You know, if you can click on that attachment, you'll see that the update on AB 361 for emergency remote meeting is that starting in March, and this is the guidance that we've received from the superintendent's office, is that we must return to in-person meetings starting in March. There are some provisions within it. So for example, if a committee, which we are a Brown Act committee, and we are a Brown Act committee as deemed by our Board of Education. And if we were to meet in person and we had some folks who still were going to work, meet remotely or needed to telemeet, they would have to go back to the previous provisions where their address of where they're located is posted, post that on our agenda. They would have to be at a location where a member of the public could say, I'm gonna come join the meeting there with you. And so we would have to do that, but the majority, and I don't know what the magic number is, but the majority of us would have to be in person, and that would still allow for some folks to be remote. And that could certainly change with each meeting, but that would be one of the provisions. We in the past talked about, you know, the realization that a lot of you are either still at work, which I totally respect, and like, you know, and it will be very difficult to start a meeting at 5 o'clock. And so knowing that we may have to adjust the time, that is certainly on the table for today to have the discussion and to kind of come to a consensus. But I just wanted to put that here and just kind of open it for discussion as to how people are feeling. And then hope is that the outcome of this will be, we will come to the understanding that our next meeting in March, unless anything new happens with the governor's office, but I doubt it, but we will meet in person at the district in March. We will have the provisions for if anyone needs to meet remotely, we could do that, following the provisions of the Brown Act, posting the address where you're at. It could not be everybody. It would have to be just a few of you. We would still have to continue to see quorum as well. But then also we are open to changing the start time for our meetings as well. And certainly we know that with some of you, there may be the need for childcare. We can definitely look at that and definitely provide some childcare depending on the needs that some of you may have, because I also know you've got a house full of kids, and we also know we appreciate that the time that you take away from your families to be here tonight. I'll give it back to Mr. Musto, and anybody else wants to jump in on this, and we can start this. And I see Ms. Shipper has her hand up.
Thank you. I work for a large law firm, and my schedule gets changed every quarter. Right now, Monday, Tuesdays, I'm working from home, so it makes it easier for me to get on these Zooms from home, fairly uninterrupted. Starting at the end of March, I have to go back in the office on Mondays and Tuesdays, and it makes it more difficult to attend or participate in these meetings if they start at 5 o'clock, because people see me at my workstation and they automatically stop by and interrupt. So I am only requesting if we start these meetings beginning in March, starting at 5:30, and no matter what, I will do my best to get myself home and on the Zoom meeting so that I can participate without any further interruptions. Thank you.
Ms. Pelletier.
I'm the new girl, but I have a lot of experience with LCAAC committees and LCAAC stakeholder groups, and I wonder if the district has considered whether the committee could continue to operate with all of the transparency and accountability of a Brown Act group without necessarily being identified as a Brown Act group, which would then reduce some of the required formality of things like the in-person and or posting leaving your hotel door open kinds of issues. LCAAC parent LCAAC committees are not required to be Brown Act, although I completely understand and appreciate the desire to ensure that the transparency and formality of the group meet those terms. I wonder if that's something the district has considered. And I actually believe that in-person is better way to achieve some of the results of these things. As someone who's been working in the school system, you know, teachers and many of us have been back in classrooms on school sites for years. So, you know, thinking that a group like this can't be in person, I think is, you know, it doesn't, the messages don't jibe. So I appreciate the discussion about returning to in-person. And at least I won't be here for the March meeting because it's my birthday and my anniversary, and I'm going to be out of town. And I don't think you want me participating from Vegas. So.
Only if you take us with you. No, sorry.
Ms. Salinas, did you want to comment on the Brown Act?
Yes, and so at this point, and I will continue to listen to the conversation. I am certainly happy. I know we have our trustees here as well, but they're here as participants and they're not the whole board. But I am happy to share this consideration request. Certainly I can do that as we move through this, and I'll continue to listen to other opinions that come up.
Thanks. Mr. Lechner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Anna Schipper's request to move the meeting to a later time. When I joined this body a little less than 2 years ago, the meetings were originally scheduled to start at 6, and it was solely pursuant to my request at the second meeting after I figured out that I would have an eternal conflict with all of the meetings, that Anna agreed to move it to 5 o'clock, and it's always been a problem for her. And so I think at this point, I owe it to Anna for her request to let the meeting start either at 5:30 or at 6. I don't want to go too far. 5:30 is, I think, more convenient for everybody, but I owe that to Anna. And then with respect to the Brown Act, Ms. Salinas and also Jeanette, I was going to say that I have a little bit of experience with the Brown Act through the city of Fremont, and I recognize that we have 2 trustees present in this body. I think that this body is in charge of at least some money or monies that flow to the district. And my assumption is that, I know I said this in the last meeting, why don't we just, get rid of the Brown Act provision and we'll still, and everything. But I think politically, my read is that it would be desirable for the district to maintain the Brown Act restrictions, because it is really only the Brown Act that establishes personal liability on each of us to ensure that these meetings happen in an orderly fashion. And Anjanette, while I totally understand where you're coming from, and I love being at home, I don't know if that's realistic. I'll just say that.
Thanks. Ms. Chan?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to echo, I do also think it would be great if we could start to meet in person. However, I do understand that being a part of this committee is a volunteer, and I would hate for us to lose our community representatives, our parents, because we are moving to in person. I do support in person, but I think it's more important to have our community voices here. And so I guess that doesn't really solve anything either way. But that's just kind of where I stand. I think there's benefits to meeting in person. I've been on this committee, this is my 2nd year, and there are still people that I haven't met in person, which I would love to meet in person. And I think it just kind of adds to our collaboration when working with one another. But I also would not want us to lose people. So I think if people are able to make it in person, I would love for us to move in that direction. But if we are going to lose people, I think we need to kind of see in what ways we can support everybody that's a part of this committee.
Thank you for those, we've got some really good conversation going. Anyone else? Okay, now, Ms. Salinas, I noted this is an action item. Do we need to vote to
Yeah.
return to in-person?
Well, not to return to in person, but
Oh.
I think what's on the table is changing the time. So that would require a vote, and what I could say is if everyone is in agreement with 5:30 for the March meeting, we can try it, and certainly, and if people want to message me or you, Mr. Musto, about childcare, we can provide childcare. Some snacks. We'll get some snacks there for us. And then I can, and if maybe after this next meeting, we could see how it goes. And then if folks would like for me to reach out to the board, the whole board, and say, hey, would you consider this? Maybe we try it. That is what we have to do, and maybe we go from there. And I see President Prasad is his hand.
Yes, I was actually going to say what you just said, Ms. Salinas, that I mean, we understand. I mean, I look at my personal hardship as well, and we discussed this in our board retreat. And for me to drive from here to be in person is at least 45 minutes, right? So to attend a 5 o'clock call means leave at 4. And I'm sure others would have the same hardship. So meeting later will solve part of the problem. But as if we really pride ourselves in transparency, and that's why we have more meetings, more committees as Brown Act committees than what maybe other districts do. So as a tenet, that continues to be potentially our biggest care about, where we want to make sure that your valuable time continues to be available for these committees. So if Ms. Salinas brings this and even a more broader look at other committees as well to see which ones really cannot be can be removed from Brown Act, then the board should certainly look at those and see how to keep the broader community engagement going. And I agree with what Victoria Chan mentioned, is that we want to be meeting each other face to face as much as possible. So Brown Act or not, if we can at least make the meetings hybrid at that point, right? So that way the collaboration can be at a much higher level.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lechner.
So as your secretary, I'll say that the recordings are very valuable in preparing the last meeting's minutes. Will the meeting on March be recorded? Or
I know previously we had done an audio recording. Hadn't we? I can't remember.
I don't know. I would candidly have to look at that. Probably not, but it is open to the public. And if in the event that we do have some folks who are going to have to commute, or not commute, I apologize, who are going to need to Zoom in, it's a lot to manage. So I think I could, but I'm happy to look into it. But at this point, it will be in person. It's open to the public, and if there's some folks that need to, yeah.
I'm not requesting it. I was just wondering.
Okay.
I'll bring a few more pencils then.
Ms. Shiver.
I've been on this committee for quite a while, and I can tell you for a fact that it was recorded, where somebody actually brought in a small recording device, recorded the whole meeting, so that FUSD employee could have their secretary later on, type out the minutes so that it was then available. So all of the meetings have been recorded. I just wanted to share that with you guys.
I sort of remember that as well. Yeah, thank you. Ms. John.
I will have to say, I just want to put this out there. I'm pretty against hybrid meetings. I just don't think that they work well. They're very difficult to run on multiple ends. I do think having public comment available via Zoom would be great, but like having discussion through I mean, we've seen it at the board meetings as well, as there's sometimes a lag, and it's extra difficult, and I would hate for our focus on the work to be shifted to hybrid, malfunctions. That's just my opinion. I mean, of course I want as many people as we can, but I just feel like hybrid is really difficult. I've been on multiple ends on that in all the different meetings I'm in. So I understand wanting to get as many people, but hybrid's hard. And so I just wanted to make sure I also don't want us to be stretched too thin in what we're doing. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you. So it sounds like we're going to try next month with old school in person. We're going to measure the participation. Want to make sure the community is involved, and Ms. Salinas will be reporting out to the board trustees in her role. But we do need to talk about the start time. 5:30 has been the number I've heard the most. Do we have a motion for the March meeting to start at 5:30? Mr. Lechner?
I would be honored to move.
All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Anna Schipper seconds.
All right. Let's have anyone would like to discuss that 5:30 start time further? Mr. Lechner, do you have anything to add, or you just have your hand up? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, then we have a motion. We have a second. Is there anyone opposed to the 5:30? Otherwise, if that's the case, we will do a roster call. Hearing no opposition, we will start the March meeting at 5:30, and we will do a measurement of participation as well. So thank you all. That brings us to the end of our meeting at 5:58, so we're pretty much on time. Are there any other things for the good of the order that we want to share? Oh, Ms. Chan, thank you.
Sorry, so did we make a decision? Are we moving to in-person, like for sure, for the next meeting? We are.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that being said, I think we can close the meeting. Thank you very much for participating, and we will see you in person a month from now. Good to see you.